So this is going to be new for me. People who don't know this channel or happen to stumble upon it, I do a Tumblr reaction blog where I read various webcomics that people recommend to me with the occasional movie or show thrown in. Well, for this year, I guess since it's New Year's resolution of 2025, I'm going to be trying something different. I'm going to do little reviews of Stephen King. Stephen King's my favorite author. I first picked up it when I was 16 years old. It, it was the longest book I've ever read. It took me like about a month for me to finish it, and it was the first legit horror book that actually scared me. And ever since, I was hooked. I love Stephen King. I love his prose, I love his descriptions, his characterizations, everything. I'm one of those people that love his endings. And if you know Stephen King or if you're a fan of Stephen King, you know that's a pretty decisive opinion on how people love or hate his endings. Um, Honestly, I don't care where I get my books for Stephen King. They could either be brand new, they could be either secondhand, they could be torn to pieces. I grab as many as I can just to appease my inner hoarder. And that's actually part of the problem here. So I have so many Stephen King novels that they need their own bookcase, one. But the more important thing is that I've only read about half of them. And that's a bit of a problem of mine, regardless of whatever I'm into, is like I buy so much so soon that my attention span tends to move on and I never backtrack on the things that I just got. But honestly, I really do love Stephen King. And I want my collection to be actually well read instead of just being possessive. So that's my plan. Or that's going to be my plan. Starting this year, January 2025, I'm going to read everything that Stephen King has ever written or touched on in publication order. Why? Mostly because I want to see if I could clock how he changed his writing over the decades. Probably not, but just in case. And plus it'll help me keep better track of all the stuff that I've done. Of course, I wouldn't have this video set as 0 if that's sort of all there is to it, because I know that other people do reviews and stuff, and when I started looking into the amount of stuff that he's done, oh boy, there is a lot. Not just books he wrote, there's also a lot of stuff he's been published in, or stuff that he has published personally, like novels, short stories, screenplays, other people's anthologies, speeches, essays. He wrote an episode of X-Files. And not to mention everyone doing as many adaptations as possible on his stuff, so there is a lot tied to this man's name. And if I just limit myself to only books, how can I call myself a King fan if I just sort of stop there, you know? So, plan is, for every item that I check out, I'm going to give a brief review, and then rank it on one of those S-tier scales. Overall, this is just honestly mostly for me personally to keep track of my own opinions of his books. So, review is really stretching it. It's going to be me speaking off the cuff about my own opinion on things. Plus, the S-tier thing sounds pretty fun. And so I just want to keep piling more stuff in and see just what kind of a mess this list is going to be by the end of things. So for me, this is going to be my KingQuest challenge. And I'm going to implement some rules here to start off to wrangle everything around so that way I'm not going to lose myself to the sauce and lose the whole point of this. Thus, we start at number 0, the rules. Rule 1, anything written by Stephen King. This man is a writer. I need to read what he wrote. So any novels, short stories, essays, speeches, introductions, etc. goes. If the tagline is basically, by Stephen King, that's going in the pile. Rule 2, anything Stephen King is published in. Stephen King is an author. So he has a lot of books and short stories. But he also has a lot of short stories in other works, like a bunch of anthology books. So since Stephen King was published in those, they count too. This also applies to introductions that Stephen King would do sometimes for other books, like Blackboard Jungle or The Girl Next Door. So I'll be reading those books along with reading the introduction. Obviously, those books are not written by Stephen King, but I'm just going to do a minor review as a whole about the book themselves and separate that from the Stephen King part. Like, how would a Stephen King fan appreciate those books, or would they really be more interested in the introduction type stuff? Rule 3. Anything Stephen King cameoed in. You know that Stephen King has a lot of cameos? I mean, not as much as he writes, but there's a fair number of movies and TV episodes that he was in. He was in an episode of Sons of Anarchy. Why? No idea, but I'll find out eventually. So anything that has him as a paid actor, going on the list. Rule 4. Anything adapted from Stephen King. Movies, episodes, TV shows, comics, whatever. If it's adapted from a Stephen King story, then it's on the list. The only caveat to this is that it has to be a direct adaptation. Something where the original source material is a Stephen King story. Anything else won't count. So, for example, Children of the Corn, 1984, 2009, and 2023, they count because they are all based on the original short story. Children of the Corn 2 through 6 or 2 through 7, however that sort of ends up at, they don't count because they are spin-offs off of the original movie. That could be probably added in or visited later, but for right now, just direct adaptations. And as a minor addition to this rule, it's going to be Rule 4B, no Dollar Baby adaptations. Stephen King is pretty cool, and he had a thing called the Dollar Baby Club, where for $1, you can buy the rights and adapt any of his short stories. And he did this specifically to let, new artists and new filmmakers try their stuff out. Good for him for that. Most of them, however, are under 10 minutes long, 30 minutes if I'm lucky, and there is so many of them, and in so many different languages, and this list is literally over 400 items long, I'm not going to do that. No more. I'm already stretching myself thin as it is. We're just going to put a pin on that to do later, maybe. Rule 5. Must be publicly available. Whatever the Stephen King thing is that I'm going to do, I have to get my hands on it for it to count. Meaning that it has to be available for the wider audience to access. Stuff like his limited edition novels, like 6 stories, or a stage play that doesn't have a recording ever. Yeah, if I can't see it, there's no point in me reviewing it. Now, if I get my hands on a rare copy, you bet your ass I'm going to talk about it, but I'm not going to wait around until that happens, so I'm just going to skip over that item and move on to the next thing. Rule 6. Must be in English. To the shock and terror of all, I can't review a thing I can't read. And I'm one of those people that only knows English. I know some Spanish for a basic conversation, but mostly English. So if it's not in English, it can't be helped. Sorry, Woe, the 1998 Hindi adaptation of It, where the child-murdering clown is trying to reclaim his one-lost love after being summoned from Omar's hidden temple. Unless someone is kind enough to give me English subtitles for the episodes that are completely free on YouTube that anyone else can watch, I will not be able to enjoy your splendor. Someday, but not today. Finally, Rule 7. This challenge is done in publication order. Yeah, there's an asterisk there, and that asterisk is important. I'm going to be doing this in publication order to see how the writing changes over the decades, if I notice. The only problem is that the anthology books don't have specific publication dates. The movies are great, The main Stephen King novels, great. Other random books are so hard to pin down when they were officially published. Like, I use a combination of Amazon book listings, Wikipedia, Goodreads, ISBN numbers, Google. There's a nice website called StephenKing.com. And I managed to at least try to get the month of the release, if not the very specific day. Again, I went through all 400 plus items on my list to do this. This is about as accurate as I'm gonna get for solo research. Also, for stuff like TV shows, which again, he has many of, either one-off episodes or just whole ass seasons. If there's a one-off episode, I'm just gonna use the full date. Make it easy on me. If there's like a whole season or 7 of the actual show, I'm gonna go with the date of the first episode. Like, that's the main date, and I'll just binge watch from there. So for season shows, I'm not going to do a review of each individual episode because that is way too long and not going to hold my attention span, and I'm not going to stop in between watching episodes to happen to like read other books if the dates sort of like coincide like that. It would ruin my pacing and focus for me. So, to make it easier, on me specifically, I'm just gonna watch the whole thing from the first episode and then just do a recap review-ish thing overall. And that's pretty much it. I'm just gonna be following these rules as I do my KingQuest challenge. And again, this is mostly for me. I'm not expecting anything from these videos, and frankly, I don't want to. This is for fun for me to make like a pretty cool S tier list, maybe one for movie adaptations and maybe one for books, I don't know. And I just want to make my library as well read as I want it to be. Like, I want it to be like I read the things that I enjoy instead of I just have and look at. So, if you stumble upon this or want to check it out, feel free to watch it if you want. Feel free to comment if you want. Or you could ignore me if you want. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and start with the book that started it all. Carrie. Wish me luck.